Kaushal Patel, luxury realtor in America's finest city. Your dream home in paradise is waiting. Buying your piece of paradise with Kaushal. Presented on IQ Podcast at Attorney King Studios. Sponsored by Oscar Gastelum, president of Mortgage Hub Incorporated. MortgageHub.loans. Now, Kaushal Patel.
Hope you're having a fantastic week, fantastic day, all of the above. I'm Kaushal Patel with Windermere Homes Estates, and I have a special treat for us today on my podcast. The next mayor of San Diego, Todd Gloria, joins me. And I'm sure, Todd, we can talk about all sorts of topics for hours, but let's begin with something that's been a top priority for you and on the campaign, and really something that's essential for all San Diegans, all Americans, is shelter. You know, people have described our housing shortage in California as a crisis. Why has San Diego failed to build enough homes for decades? And can we, or how can we quickly increase our housing supply?
It's a great question, and thank you for lifting up this issue. I think in this time we find ourselves in a pandemic, in an economic recession, as well as a civil rights conversation, it's easy to push this issue off the headlines, but it's still a major problem. We had a housing crisis before COVID-19. There's one happening right now, and it's likely that the housing crisis will be worse because of the pandemic. You asked, how did we get here? And it wasn't overnight. This is something that has built up over decades, not just in San Diego, but across California, where, just broadly speaking, we basically permit about half the homes that we need to keep up with population growth. And, you don't have to be an economics major to understand that scarcity increases costs, right? Fewer homes for our children and our grandchildren means the costs go up and up and up. And it's not going to be solved overnight, and so what we must do is start that work now, recognizing it's going to take quite a while to dig ourselves out of the hole that we are in. And that's very much a part of my public service, a part of why I'm running for mayor, is that I think that you cannot be a great city if we're just a place for the very wealthy who can afford to live here and the very poor who are trapped here. We have to build more homes that working people like you and I can actually afford.
Yeah, we don't want to be a place of just the rich or just the lucky who got here just in time, because how are we going to attract those workers if they don't have a place to live? The numbers are staggering, and I just want our listeners to understand how bad it is, and this is just an example. This is 6 years ago. So in 2014, Tokyo issued permits for about 142,000 new housing permits. That's what they did in 2014. The entire state of California, we're 3 times the size, the population, 3 times the size. In 2014, only 83,000 new housing permits. Can we do something dramatic, like increase that number in San Diego to 10 to 20,000 per year? Is that something feasible?
It is. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy to do. But you're exactly right. When people share with me, the cost of housing is so incredible. The rent is too high. I can't see being able to buy a home in this city. The answer is that we have to build more housing, lots of different kinds of housing in pretty much all corners of our city. And how do you do that? Well, there's some process improvements, some managerial improvements that could be done at the city to make sure that the permitting department is working efficiently, that is customer service oriented and makes the process as easy as possible. Obviously, delays end up adding cost, right, to a home, and that's eventually reflected in the rent or in the for sale price. There's stuff that we're doing in Sacramento as a state assembly member where we're passing legislation to try and address this as well, acknowledging that this is a statewide housing crisis, and San Diego can't solve California's problems all by itself. Every city has to do its fair share, and we have a reasonably pro-housing group of leaders today. And yet we're still not making our marks. Think about all the communities across California that don't have that perspective, that don't have that attitude, and you recognize why this is a statewide problem that really is a major threat to the globe's 5th largest economy. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We will not stay in that position if we cannot properly house our people.
And just on the heels of that, the state has eased the cost of building ADUs, which is progress. Talking to contractors and people who have to pull city permits on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, they say that it would be really, really helpful for them if there were more people to review those permits and there was more consistency in that process. Is that an easy fix?
I think so. But I've certainly seen people make that promise and it's never delivered. And this is a part of why I'm running for mayor, is that give me a crack at it. Let me try, because I agree that that's a challenge. Probably your listeners would hear, well, hiring more people is more cost. What people don't know is that the positions we're talking about are actually paid for by the fees that are assessed in the permit process. So it's kind of a closed loop, right? If you have more people, people may end up paying more on their permits. And frankly, for a lot of folks I talk to, they would be perfectly fine doing that because the cost of delay is actually more than the increase in the permit fee, if that makes sense. So I don't think that's impossible. What I think is actually an additional step, which is really performance metrics, right? It isn't just hiring bodies for the sake of having bodies. It's about having employees that are managed and held accountable for the workflow. How many projects must you review daily, monthly? Are you hitting those targets? What is your timeliness for response? Those kinds of specific performance indicators would go a long way to telling city management, hopefully me as the next mayor, who's the performers and who are not. Where do we need more training? Where do we need more assistance, more resources, or are things going well? I don't think we have that level of detail, and I think that would go a long way as a low cost and almost immediate solution to this particular problem. There are bigger challenges. You mentioned the ADU legislation the state has passed. That took state law change, right? That took significant action. That is never quick. So a coupling of short-term and easier fixes along with these longer-term fixes is how you comprehensively address the housing crisis in California.
Now we're going to move on to some propositions. We have one on the ballot we'll talk about in a second, but first, Prop 13. That was a measure that was approved by voters back in the 70s. It basically limits property tax increases until the home is sold. It sounds great, but is it unfair for younger people who end up buying that home and now, that home is $900,000 where the previous owners bought it for $90,000 and they were paying less than $1,000 in taxes a year, and now it becomes $10,000 per year for taxes or more. Is that unfair for the younger folks?
I've certainly heard that argument, and you see that borne out exactly as you say. A home that has not changed hands in a long time has a relatively low property tax burden, whereas newer home construction or newer purchase stuff, typically younger people end up paying more. So there's an inversion of that, though, right? Part of Prop 13 came from the fact that rapidly increasing housing values were pricing people out of their homes. They couldn't pay their property taxes. And so in this conversation that we're having about affordability, as we concern ourselves with what does it take to be able to afford to live in California, think about a senior on a fixed income who has unpredictable property taxes, right? Increasing at rates that are beyond the cost of living of, say, their Social Security benefit. That's the certainty that Prop 13 provides residential property owners. There's a ballot measure this year that would change that certainty for commercial property owners, and the voters of California will have an opportunity to make a decision on that this November.
And when we talk about Prop 19, which, is that going to help or hurt the housing situation?
Well, Prop 19, which is a very narrowly tailored change, so different than the commercial property tax measure that I just mentioned to you. Prop 19 is actually intended or is hoped to address affordability in kind of a unique way. As I was mentioning, Prop 13 from 1978 provides this level of certainty. It also provides a disincentive for moving. Because as you say, when the property changes hands, the property tax is reassessed. So we have observed behavior of property owners not choosing to sell their homes, maybe downsize. Maybe they've finished raising their children. They don't need a single family home. Maybe they'd want something smaller, but they can't bear the additional property tax burden of a 2020 assessment rather than a 1978 assessment, right? This legislation, Prop 19, would say that you'd have some more portability to your Prop 13 property tax assessment. And the belief, the hope, is that that will cause some homes to still come on the market that wouldn't come on the market otherwise, because the existing homeowner would not fear the change in property taxes. So that is the way it has been explained, is this is a modest way of making a minor alteration that could result in some more home sales. And that is why you see strong support from realtors and others. The additional funds that would come, there's another piece of this that's important. Again, lots of observed behavior. Some of the Prop 13 protections are inherited. So if your parents had a property, if you inherited it from them, you maintain their property tax status. What we're observing is that there are a lot of folks who are inheriting properties who are not occupying those properties. Instead, they're using them for commercial purposes. So Prop 19 would also say that unless you're living in the home, your inherited Prop 13 benefit would not continue. It would be reassessed. And that would actually generate a significant amount of money for the state, funds that we would like to dedicate towards wildfire prevention and funding our firefighter services. Which
we definitely need. We can't thank those firefighters enough for putting their life on the line for countless Californians. It seems like when the issue, Todd, of building more housing hits the ballot, it fails. It's this mentality of not in my backyard. Is that ever going to change?
I think so. I mean, and actually, I think you're largely what you said is correct. Although I'd point out that there was what was represented as a no-growth measure on the ballot this past March, Measure A, that would have made it significantly more difficult to build housing in the unincorporated areas of San Diego County, and the voters turned that down. But they did sustain Prop B or Measure B that actually was authorizing a construction of a very large residential project. So it was sort of a split decision, and I think that says that the San Diegans are open to more housing opportunities. It isn't about building anything anywhere, though. And I think that's really important because building homes out in the backcountry in the wildfire-prone areas is not really smart, both from a safety perspective. It also doesn't help us meet our state requirements with regard to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and limiting the amount of driving that people do. Additionally, building skyscrapers along our coastal waterfront, that's kind of the most expensive form of housing. Again, what we need to focus on is building housing that working and middle-class people can afford. So I think that projects that really speak to that speak to housing for everyday San Diegans, I think get a fairer hearing and get more of a positive response. And so I think it's incumbent upon those of us that understand that the housing crisis is a supply issue, that we have to make sure the projects that are coming forward are really tailored at the right place, which is typically near existing infrastructure, near jobs, that you have the affordability levels that the community needs, not a lot of luxury stuff that we have an overabundance of, but that sort of middle sector housing. And then the right kinds of community benefits. And while I've seen project opponents turn to proponents when they are able to engage in a dialogue that says, this is how this is going to improve your community. What I'd like to see is us break this narrative that new housing construction is necessarily bad for your neighborhood.
Thank you.
That is something that people too often believe, and it's simply not true. In my time as a city council member, tons of projects that had significant community opposition, once they were constructed, are embraced by the community. I think we as human beings are often afraid of change. I don't particularly like change either. I have a particular schedule. I like keeping to it. That makes me happy. When people suggest that your neighborhood, something that you care deeply about, is going to change in any kind of way, the knee-jerk reaction is often one of no. What we have to do is keep the lines of communication open long enough to construct the dialogue to understand what's the right thing is this the right location? Is this the right mix? Is this the right community benefit? Again, when I've seen us be able to get to yes on that stuff, the projects proceed. And the problem of it is that we have to do a lot of that. It's not going to solve the problem one project. We have to do a lot of that. And again, this is a part of why I want to be the mayor. I see this as the biggest issue in the city. We have to defeat COVID-19. We have to get the economy back on track. We must deal with our issues in Black and brown communities and their treatment by the public sector. But the housing crisis is a top priority, and it can only be solved with strong executive leadership coming out of the mayor's office.
Yeah, but if people can change that mindset, the possibilities are really endless. Just 20 years ago, I don't think anybody thought all those empty parking lots in downtown that Nat Bosa decided to pick up and build those, luxury condos. Did anybody think anybody was going to move in there? And, Pacific Gate, Savina, most of them are nearly sold out.
Yeah.
And those are the newest buildings downtown. So, if you build it, they will come. I think that's similar to Portside Pier. Anthony's was there for 7 decades, and they built 4 restaurants there. And if you've been there on any day of the week, there's so many people and families and that energy that our city makes our city so vibrant,
we are a big city and we have to start acting like it.
Yes.
And, we're a city we're the 8th largest in the United States, the 2nd largest in California. You said, if you build it, they will come. I would invert that. I would say they're already here. We have people who are doubling and tripling up. They are delaying home purchasing. They're delaying having children. because of our housing crisis. And so I just see this as a quality of life issue. I see this as an economic issue. It's almost a human rights issue, right? When you see thousands of San Diegans living on the street, that is unacceptable. And I acknowledge, I'm the first to say, there are mental illness issues there. There's behavioral health issues that are involved there. But a lot of those folks work. They have jobs, but they can't find a place they can afford to live. It is a challenge to all of us to be a part of the solution, not to continue to obstruct and make life miserable for other people.
Yeah, and you touched a little bit about those folks who are on the street, homeless. There's this idea being thrown around about housing, shipping containers to house the homeless. Is that a viable option?
I think it is. I had an opportunity to tour a demonstration project in Kearny Mesa. And you know what? Looked pretty good to me. I mean, I'm kind of an all the above approach, right? We are not we don't have the luxury of being super selective about, we don't want this, we don't want that. We need single family homes. We need granny flats. We need
it all.
We need it all.
Yeah.
And again, we can debate and negotiate the particulars, but ultimately we need more housing. In this particular case, the value of these shipping containers, as I understand it, is the relative low cost and the speed with which they can be built. And this is in a context you can think about this. COVID has made a lot of things that were once impossible possible. You may know, your listeners may know, the convention center has been repurposed into a temporary homeless shelter that houses roughly 1,300 people as we speak. At some point, the convention center will resume operation as a tourist destination. And when it does, we're going to have to find a place for these 1,300 of our neighbors to go. And that's going to need a quick turnaround. And so when we look at this particular option, that may be one that you can deploy relatively quickly to provide homes to people fast. The other piece of this that I would just say is that, so much of our life has seen innovation, right? You have a smartphone that you didn't have 10, 15 years ago, but now controls your whole life, right? We have seen innovation in all sectors of our economy. I don't think we've seen a lot of innovation in the housing sector. And for the size of this particular problem, I think we need to start getting innovative if we want to have real solutions that impact real people.
Let's call Jeff Bezos.
Yes, exactly.
Let's call the people that make things happen. The next topic has many people up in arms, regulating short-term rentals. Yeah. Is there a compromise that can be reached to please both sides?
Yeah, I do think so. And I say that as someone who's had some experience with this. When I got on the city council in 2008, the city had yet to regulate medical marijuana dispensaries. And so at that time, the voters of California had approved cannabis dispensaries in 1996. By way of reference, I was in high school. Many, many years later, I get elected to the city council, and the city had still not provided any regulations. Much like the vacation rental issue, it wasn't as though there weren't any dispensaries. There were over 200 in our city, but no one had ever gotten around to passing regulations. It was extremely controversial. We had a referendum. It took a lot of years, but by 2013, 2014, we put some rules on the books. What happened? We don't have 200 illegal dispensaries. We have a couple dozen legal dispensaries with all the regulations, the taxes being paid, et cetera. And that issue isn't something that's in the front page every single day any longer, right? There's no more, police raids and all that kind of stuff. There's certainty of process. I think there's a similarity that's here. San Diego, weirdly, has not been able to get this done. Most other cities have successfully regulated this. So this is not a unicorn. It exists in nature. And what we simply need, in my opinion, is leadership. When I was on the city council, I passed 2 motions directing the mayor to bring forward an ordinance to regulate short-term vacation rental. The mayor ignored both of those motions. The mayor has never put forward a plan of his own for how he would like to regulate vacation rentals. And so in that absence of leadership, you have seen a void of progress. And so I think, and there actually now is a compromise that's on the table being championed by Council Member Jen Campbell, who represents the PB Point Loma area. I'm hopeful that the council will look at that, maybe improve upon it, and pass it. If they don't, my commitment to San Diego voters is that we will take care of this swiftly. Again, this is something other cities have successfully addressed. There's no reason why San Diego shouldn't. And I think it's important to get this off the civic list of things to do, because that is occupying space, time, and energy that needs to be focused on our broader housing crisis, our homelessness crisis, solving rebuilding our economy and tackling COVID-19.
And affordable housing, is that just the impossible dream in San Diego? Because the costs, if you look at the median price for a home, it just keeps going up and up every time. And I do real estate, and I'm shocked every time that now it's at almost 600,000 and above 600 in certain places in San Diego County.
I like hearing you say that, because I think sometimes when we see these listings, we're like, do they know that that's a really crazy number?
That is 3 or 4 homes in a lot of other cities in America.
To answer your question, we are always going to be an expensive place to live. I think the question is do regular people have a shot at living here? No one's asking for a free ride. No one's asking to be handed anything. What they're saying, though, is that if I work hard and I play by the rules, I ought to have some chance to be able to live here. And I think that's particularly true for people who are like myself, who are natives of San Diego, right? We were born here. We were raised here. The city paid to educate me, to give me the skills and talents and whatnot to start a career. But if we don't provide a place for people of my generations and younger to live here, we have made those investments, and some other community is going to benefit from them. So while, again, I'm not asking for any handouts or anything, but I'm saying if you're willing to work hard and play by the rules, you should have a place here in San Diego. You should be able to belong here in San Diego. And that's essentially what my campaign's about. I think we can build a city that works for all of us.
Now we're going to talk about something that we can all smile about. And I'm not alone in this. I know that everybody's been loving the al fresco dining, the outdoor dining, and you played a role in that. Can this be a permanent thing?
Yes. And I was asked that question recently by a journalist, and they're like, well, would you support continuing that? I'm like, I don't think it matters what I think. I think San Diegans are going to demand that it stay that way. And thank you for acknowledging the role that we played in this. Many restaurants, obviously are regulated by the state of California. And what I've been really heartened by, I know government gets a bad rap a lot of the time, and red tape and delays, et cetera. This is one of those instances where we saw restaurants hurting and took swift action to cut red tape, to allow them to operate outside of their 4 walls, which is typically not allowed, because it's necessary to keep their businesses alive. We did that swiftly. We have partners at the county and the city who are helping collaboratively to make this possible. And what I think you're seeing is that it's a home run. People love it. And so I'm hopeful that on the back end of this, as we sort of take stock of lessons learned once we've defeated COVID-19, that in a community as beautiful as ours, with weather as fantastic as ours, maybe this is something we should do permanently. And I would point out that wherever we've done that, wherever we have reclaimed public spaces away from cars and given back to people, I'm thinking about the Plaza de Panama in Balboa Park. I'm thinking about the Waterfront Park on Pacific Highway, Date Street in Little Italy, the Piazza della Famiglia. Mm-hmm. These were all places that were streets, parking lots, etc. Now they're beautiful public plazas. You can have a drink, you can have something to eat, you can enjoy the atmosphere with your family. People love those stuff, and I think we need to find more opportunities for San Diegans to have chances to enjoy our beautiful environment outdoors. Yeah,
you don't even need to go to Europe. You have Europe in San Diego, right? It feels like it's that feeling that you get like you're in Italy, you know? So it's very nice. So today's a pivotal day for you, Todd. And, along with that, I want you to address that and share with us why it's pivotal. But I also want you to share, during this time of a pandemic, what are the blessings as we wrap up this podcast? What are the blessings that you feel that you never even realized that you had?
Well, the reference you're making for your listeners' benefit is that this was my last day voting in the legislature. We have concluded our floor session. We finished about 2 a.m. We're doing this on the morning on Tuesday. So I'm working on probably about 3.5 hours sleep. Probably shouldn't be on a podcast for such little sleep, but hopefully I'm doing okay.
You did a great job.
Hopefully I'm doing okay. And you're right. It is, I spent 4 years in the legislature representing my hometown up in the state capitol. And it's been, to use your word, a blessing. It absolutely has been that. And, they have a tradition in the legislature on your last day. They invite your colleagues to say a few words, almost like a funeral that you're alive for, to sort of watch what people would say, and then the chance to speak on your own thoughts as you sort of conclude your time. And what I shared yesterday with the group was that I feel so blessed to be a San Diegan, to be a Californian, to be an American, that a story like mine, I'm the son of a maid and a gardener. I am brown, I am gay, but I'm here in San Diego. And while plenty of people have told me that I couldn't be fill in the blank because of who I am, where I came from, my economic status, none of that's proven true. That this community has invested in me and given me opportunities to allow me to serve as a state assembly member when, only a few decades ago, my mom was cleaning hotel rooms. That's the power of this community, of this country. It's why I'm so proud to live here. And it's why I do everything I can to try and make this place a better place to live. Not for me, but so that stories like mine are not unique, but that hopefully everyone has that broad shared opportunity to be whatever they want to be if they're willing to work hard enough.
It's such a powerful message. And my parents are immigrants too. And, whenever people ask me what I am, it's very simple. I'm American. And that's all you need to know. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this country. End of story. So, I really do want to make sure everybody knows that this year in California, everybody's going to get a mail-in ballot. And not only are we going to get the mail-in ballot, but we're going to get 4 days, not 1 day, to vote. So there are no excuses not to make it to the polling places, right, Todd?
You got it exactly right. And thank you for saying that, because we understand that this is an important election. And it's happening in the context of a pandemic. And so we should be doing everything we can to make it easy. So yes, you will get a mail-in ballot, regardless if you've been historically a mail voter or not. Everyone will get one. You will also have the opportunity to vote in person. And as exactly as you say, it's not just on the first Tuesday in November. You can vote on Halloween. We will have voting stations in most neighborhoods with the opportunity to do that for up to 4 days. So, and we also pay your postage. So if you're a mail voter, you don't have to go find a stamp. It's already paid for. There's really no excuse to let your voice be heard. Obviously, I have strong feelings on how I'd like people to vote, but ultimately, please vote. We are a democracy, and this is the most. I've had a lot of titles in my career. I've been a council member, a council president, an interim mayor, I've been an assembly member, majority whip. The most important office in a democracy is the office of citizen, which we all hold. You have to do your job. You have to vote.
It's pretty easy. It says Mayor of San Diego, and there's a box that says Todd, Gloria. You just check that. Todd, Gloria, thank you so much for your time, taking time out of your very, very busy schedule and spending some time with us to talk about an issue that's so important for all San Diegans. And good luck to you in November.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. I'd like to also thank my sponsor, Oscar Gastelum from Mortgage Hub. Remember, if you need help buying or selling your piece of paradise in San Diego, give us a call, 858-244-3298. Again, that number is 858-244-3298. Have a blessed day.